You can't go far wrong with a Nike Air Force 1, 38 years of the same silhouette, just churning itself out, turning out some new colorways here, left, right and center. Today we've got a classic red, white and blue colorway, but there are just many things about this shoe. There's a lot that I know, but there's a lot that I just don't know, like the name of the thing. There's a big long name for it that looks like it's almost scientific or something like that, but usually these things have a real short name, something a little bit simpler, and that's one of the questions in today's video, is what's with the name. The other one is, why is it so low key? And we're going to get into that and compare it to the blazer that's from the same pack, because there's parts in this shoe that should pop. They're supposed to pop, but they don't. We've got to ask that question. Why don't these parts of the shoe, which parts of the shoe, which compared to that blazer, pop hard on the blazer but don't pop hard on these guys? So there's a lot to look at, a lot to get into on it, and that's what we're going to do right now as we take a look at this upcoming release of the Nike Air Force 1 Low Pacific Blue. This is the Tokyo Butter 23 Sneaker Channel. Tokyo Butter 23 Sneaker Channel です。毎日アップするので毎日見てください。And every single day from Tokyo, Japan, I bring content about upcoming sneaker releases, sneaker news, and sneaker reviews. And this one's coming out on December 21st. And I'm guessing that this video is probably going to come to you guys round about December 12th, or now a bit later than that, maybe 14th or 15th. So right a week before the drop date, which is exactly what I want to be doing. The upcoming release, telling you guys all the details on the shoe, giving you some inside information on it to tell you whether or not this is one to go after. And there's some interesting stuff going on here. There's a question about whether or not this does hark back to 1980s basketball uniforms. I don't remember 1980s basketball uniforms having this sort of fade effect going on, which is the big thing with these guys and their blazer equivalents. I seem to remember the 80s having pretty solid colors in their uniforms, but that's what they're talking about. It's supposed to be a throwback. Maybe it's the colors, maybe it's the kind of blue that's in there, because it's a very particular kind of blue. You wouldn't call it royal blue or sky blue or even standard blue. There's something in there that's a little bit unique, and maybe that's what harks back to those 80s uniforms. But it is a very cool colorway, and there are some interesting hits on it. Now, I said earlier on in the video it's red, white and blue, and you can't really go far wrong with red, white and blue. And most people who see that think, yeah, that represents my country. But sorry, almost everybody in the world, because red, white and blue, yes, the Americas, well, America, but the UK, red, white and blue, even France, red, white and blue. So most people will sort of find a way to attach this shoe to themselves, but that's a clever bit of marketing by Nike and the Air Force guys, the Air Force 1 guys, because red, white and blue rarely goes wrong. And today this shoe's got a lot going right for it, especially in comparison to recent shoes that have been coming out, because they've tended to overplay it a little bit with recent shoes, oversized stitching for example, but on this one they've gone pretty much simple. And like I said, that main pop of color, that fade in the white and the blues that you see really hard on the blazers, you don't really see it hard on these guys. So it's got a bit more of a standard feel about it, and I think that'll play well in the marketplace. More people will be interested in it, whereas the blazers, which we've probably looked at a few times already, have a big splash of that white and blue fade effect on the side of them, so it's a bit of a different feel to it, even though it's basically from the same kind of line, same kind of shoe. So getting in it today, let's look at the details on this guy and look at why there are some things on this that work really, really well, and some things that I'm a little bit questionable about. So we'll start with that blue fade that we're talking about, and it only comes in two particular places, and it's hardest to see on the toe box, so we'll go there first to see that. And what it kind of looks like really is just blue with a little bit of white fade, and to be honest, I think most people would look at that and think that it's wear and tear rather than design, because it's just not enough of a fade. And again, going back to those blazers, you'll be able to see there's sort of distinct lines that run through the lateral side of that shoe that gives you a feeling of design. And then back to these Air Force 1s, and it seems a little bit almost accidental, the damage or the fade that comes especially on that toe box. But then when we get back to the midfoot section of the shoe, that's the second place where you should see that colorway coming through, and again it's more blue than anything else, but I'm fine with that because it helps this shoe stay a red, white and blue without sort of drifting into an overly designed sort of element or overly designed sneaker. But staying on that midfoot, there is something interesting to look at, which is on the swoosh, because the swoosh does one thing well, or loudly loudly, let's put it that way, and it does another thing quietly. And what I'm talking about is a white swoosh on the side. And recently we did a video about, I think it was the recycled jerseys blazer, and one of the main features on that was the oversized red stitching that ran around the swoosh, which was a point of sort of focus for your eyes to take you away from some of the other elements on the shoe. So instead of focusing here, you were focusing there. And it's kind of the opposite on these guys because they're very understated, very white swoosh, and there is that outline in red that runs around the edge, but it's not stitching, it's just an outline. And when you look really closely at the stitching, you can see that it's very low key and it's almost invisible. I think the stitching plays very much second fiddle on this shoe, and it's the materials and the leathers that come to the fore and sort of bring the whole shoe out front and center. And speaking of those materials, let's go up onto the tongue, because I was looking at the tongue, there was something about it, the way the blue pops off of it, that really caught my eye. And I think it could have been really easy for them to go with a sort of standard white tongue on these guys, but I think they did the right job of taking the color in there and going with that instead. I think that gives it a bit of pop, a bit of extra feel, and it brings more of that blue out, which, like I said, is not so, when it's only on the toe box and only on the midfoot, that's not really a whole lot of overpowering color and style in the shoe. So having that extra bit, that extra hit on the tongues is a very big yes as far as I'm concerned. And then staying there at the top of the tongues, you've got that standard Air Force One branding. Sometimes I've been known to talk about how it says Nike Air Force One, which in effect says Nike Air Force One, but that's their choice, that's their shoe, if you know what I'm saying. But design wise, again, the colours up on the tongue reinforce that red, white and blue sort of narrative that we've been going for in the shoe, which is most powerfully seen when you go around to the back of them and have a look at the heels on these guys, and you'll see the main branding panel in blue on the back there with a big pop of red branding within it, and all that's housed on a very white heel unit. So you've got real balance between the three colours on there, and that blue branding panel on there doesn't have any of that fade that's meant to be the sort of primary design element of this shoe. You've got none of that on the back. You've just got your standard red, white and blues, which definitely works for me if you're asking me. And then really the final thing to do is to flip them upside down. And this is kind of one of the odd questions about this shoe, was that it's a very solid shoe. If you look at the colours in the upper, they're very solid. Even the bits that are supposed to show fade are kind of solid. But then when you flip it upside down, you get to a translucent light blue, kind of icy blue outsole, which sort of doesn't really fit the rest of the shoe. Because of that, I think they would have been better off going with something a little bit more solid, white or maybe blue. But I think just a white outsole on these guys would have been enough. But the translucent blue kind of confuses it. It sort of like goes, you've been going along in this steady sort of solid colours narrative for the shoe, and then suddenly you're taking a turn to the left and it's off to translucent icy blue outsoles. I do like that on shoes, I'm not saying I don't. It's just that on this shoe it doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the shoe. But what does fit in is that one point of branding that they get to play around with on Air Force Ones, which is on the midsole. It's a very solid white midsole, but when you get to the back where that standard Air branding is, you can see it in blue. And we always talk in the Air Force One videos about how usually that's a place of interest on the shoe. Are they going for the same colour between the branding and the midsole, so white on white, and then you've kind of lost the branding a little bit in there, or are they going for something to contrast with that? In the case of this, they have done that and gone with blue and white, so it really pops off. I did see, I think it was the Air Force One Wheats that had the Air, the word Air, and I think it was in black, and then the little stripe that runs around the back end of the shoe in the same colour as the midsole in that wheat colourway, and or it was the other way around, the word Air was in wheat and the line was in black. But it was cool to see them sort of playing it 50-50 on that one, whereas on these guys it's very much in the blue with the stripe and with that Air branding on the side of it. So but all in all, coming back out and having a look at the whole shoe, is still a very cool shoe, a very cool Air Force One. It's got really nice dubris on it. If we go down and have a look at the bottom of the lacing system, a sort of shiny, buffed up, not in the muscular sense, in the sort of cleaned up sense, dubris at the bottom of the lacing system there with the standard AF1, very shiny and very popping. Sometimes that's in a sort of I think I would call it matte. Today's dubris is kind of gloss and shiny and popping, but sometimes they take the shine off of it and make it a sort of matte finish. But they've gone with that shiny and kind of poppy, clean Air Force One AF1 dubris at the bottom of the lacing system. And for me it works. The whole shoe kind of really fits together very nicely. Even with that translucent outsole on it, I think it's still all in all, a very nice looking Air Force One, and something that people might be interested in getting their hands on December the 21st. It doesn't really fit the Christmas vibe. Reds and greens would be more appropriate for the Christmas time, but I still think people will be interested. Wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people go after this shoe, even if they don't know the full name of it. It's something like Nike Air Force One Level 8 Hardwood Collection Blue Paradise or something along those lines. I've totally messed up that, but it's got a really long name, and I'm sure everything in that name means something, but to me we're just going to be calling this guy the Pacific Blue, and we'll stick with that. Okay, that's enough for me today. Just churning out the content right now, trying to keep ahead of things as we get into that winter season, and hopefully, you know, I've got another week at work before I get into my own winter holidays, so hopefully we'll get over that week of work, and then I can, you know, spend a couple of weeks focused on the channel and trying to build some more content for you guys out there. For now though, time for me to sign off. Thank you guys for checking it out today. I truly do appreciate it, and the only thing left to do is to tell you that I do this every single day, and that means that you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.